Hey guys, today I feel called to talk about some cool little spiritual things. You know, like I said in the description, this isn't geared toward a particular religion at all. I'm not talking about demons and angels and the whatever, hell or heaven or whatever. This isn't Christianity. This is really just it's targeted towards anyone. If you're a Christian watching this, I don't care. I have nothing against you, is what I'm trying to say, but I'm just saying this isn't for a particular religion, if you know what I mean. I'm not trying to talk about a specific religion's spiritual war, because there are different ones, but I'm just talking about how I see spiritual war, how I've come to understand it on my spiritual journey, and how I see it at this point right now in my spiritual journey. I don't know everything, so this is just some things that I sort of understand, and yeah, so you don't obviously have to listen to me. If some of this resonates with you, feel free to share in the comments your ideas, and yeah. I mean, a lot of this is going to sound really confusing. It was confusing when I was writing because I got a lot of downloads, and this is stuff I already knew. I've known this for a while. I read a book called The Law of One, which I'll talk about more later. But it was where these people channeled an alien named Ra. And this is where I got a lot of these ideas from that you're seeing me talk about right now. But I got specific downloads about just to write it out, you know? And that's what I did today is I wrote it down in my notes. You're going to see me reading from my notes. I'll specify to you if I'm reading from my notes or not, if I remember. And yeah, let's get into it. Okay. So, reading straight from the notes. I guess we'll just start with defining the fight. So there's a war, spiritual war. There's got to be sides. You know what I mean? So we have light workers. We have our light workers, and light workers helping each other grow. It's less. I feel like it's more often less organized than people on the dark path can be, because light working comes from a place of authenticity. 333 on the clock when I said that. It comes from a place of authenticity. So it's harder to pinpoint rather than the stuff you can do in the dark path. Also, it's less organized in that there's less groups of people coming together like that. You'll get things like covens, for example, like groups of witches, people combining their power for the greater good or whatever. I can't talk about it like that because I'm literally talking about spiritual warfare right now. But it's less organized in the way that it's like a lot more people are doing on an individual scale. So you'll see scattered little lights, like people's souls have lit up, and they are shining. You know what I mean? They are shining. And you'll see them like kind of scattered out by themselves. Especially since it's easier for people to unconsciously choose a path. When people consciously choose it, they more often choose to find people who are also aware and conscious of the path that they're providing for. But when you're unconscious of it, you can kind of be alone in your and you're shining, and you'll be shining so much, but you'll have friends around you who don't really understand you, and parents who can't really understand you. It's like a whole thing, you know. It's like that main character thing of like, once you start shining, you'll get people around you. If the people around you aren't shining as well, they'll be confused. Especially since a lot of the times light workers can be born into abusive families where people have whether consciously or unconsciously chosen the dark path, and we'll talk about that later. But I feel like despite there being a lot of the light workers being scattered and kind of being alone, like they're doing their own thing, but on an individual scale instead of coming together to combine their powers as a group, I feel like there still are groups of people. They're not as much. There's not as many as there are groups of people on the dark path coming together, but there still are groups of people who are light workers, who are ascending together, and they are combining their collective spiritual skills, their magic, to help not only each other in that small group, but to help the world and the earth transition to a better state, and to help themselves to transition to a better state. Because when you have that group power like that, it's multiplied. The power of the intention that your group is putting that magic out for is multiplied with how many people you have. It's a lot. It's very intense. Gotta sip my little tea real quick. I'm sorry if I seem really like during this, because I'm like, this is something I'm really passionate about and I'm really like excited to talk about. So bear with me. I feel like getting into that, there are like groups of people ascending together. There's lots of creatives speaking out on platforms, whether they're music, writing, channeling, art. And sometimes those creatives can come together and collaborate, and whatever they're putting out there, whatever the intention of what they're putting out there is intensified, if that makes sense. They grow a lot more from doing that. And I feel like light workers are really just geared to helping other people by like putting their stuff out there, putting their energy out there. It's different for different light workers. That is a common thing, especially for creatives. They want to get out a feeling, they want to express a certain emotion, and share that with the world. And if that's coming from a place of light, you know, or if it's coming from a place of authenticity like that, or it's your true self, it helps the most with that growth, if that makes sense. Like being authentic and balanced and speaking out your truth helps the most. In that, especially for those people who might like make music, and for light workers in general, just being authentic, being balanced, and speaking out your truth is very helpful. To those that like align and vibrate with light work. On the flip side, we have, of course, we have light workers. So we're gonna have people on the dark path, light path, dark path. There's different names for it. And I'll get into what the difference is in a minute. I'm just going to distinguish them by really calling them light path, dark path, choosing the light path, choosing the dark path. So on the dark path, there's a couple, there's different ways to this. The most common, I will say, the most common is the capitalistic hive mind pyramid scheme. Now, this is where I'm going to start sounding super like fucking ancient aliens, fucking like, bruh. Aliens do exist. I'm not being like that, but it's where you kind of have to use your free will to you use your free will and you choose to use another's free will against them. It's a very competitive world. It's a very competitive spiritual path, and it's really driven on competition. I feel like often you'll find people using dark magic whether they know it or not. And especially the more organized groups of people doing that, or just even individuals of people on that path, who are like genuinely fucked up people, like people. I'm not even getting into the examples right now, but like genuinely fucked up people who will try and recruit using dark magic, and they will do it early on. They will do it to they want new people, and they want a lot of them, because the pyramid scheme, you are trying to get yourself on top. That's basically on the dark path. You're trying to get yourself on top, and you have to have people under you to do that, if that makes sense. So it's easiest when they try and recruit young and gullible people, like the younger people. You'll often see younger people on the path on the darker path, especially when it comes to like naivety and not knowing what you're doing, consciously or unconsciously choosing that path, choosing it for reasons you thought were right at the time when you were younger, but your perception changed over time and age. But that's why you'll so often see like I really don't you'll see people recruiting like boys, young children, and it's like okay, let me just say it. There's a couple different examples I have for this, but one of them is just Hollywood, for example. It's like it is a dark magic thing. It is like and it is known for portraying things in a way that preys on the youth, if that makes sense. And Ziani has a really good song on this that literally explains exactly what I'm trying to say. It's called Fuck the Hollywood Cult on the TV. And it's basically like a cycle of abuse. Like they're trying to keep them in, and it's easiest when you get them young and gullible, and you do things like TV and entertainment. You use those as channels for your dark magic to bring people in. And when you get to like when it's as big as Hollywood, that's when you get devil worship. It's a different thing. Like I know I said it's not heaven and hell or nothing earlier, but it's like when I say devil worshiper, I don't mean like witchcraft. I don't mean like actual real witchcraft. I mean people who are only using their power to take from others to it's just that bad energy. It's that bad energy where like it's that greedy energy. It's like doing really dark shit and then justifying it with like and some people genuinely think they are working for the devil, and other people just have such a messed up mindset that they treat people like that. They treat others like that. They treat relationships like that. And that's how they just see it. Like, that's how you do business. That's just the show business. Like, going back to that's just the show business. Like, no. Why is pedophilia so common in the show business, in the music industry? Not only is it easy to recruit when they're young and gullible, but with this specifically bad, like greedy, dark, like fucked up mindset of like that devil worshiper type energy, that comes with a lot of unhealed inner child. A lot of unhealed inner child. And you know what people always do when they have an unhealed inner child? Is that a child right there? Project onto them everything that I feel about my inner child. Okay? So we have a lot of that going. We have a huge loop. It's just, let me calm down, because there is a lot of that hive mind going on, of people just not even realizing it. can let me stop because I can go off on a tangent, but I think y'all understand the point. We have the light workers, we have the dark stuff. I'm not just saying that the dark stuff is only that weird fucked up devil type energy of like seriously damaging people and yourself. I will get into later how the dark side can be used intentionally to help gain further knowledge. But I'll get into that later. I'm not just saying that the dark side is only the bad thing and that the light side is only the good thing. Hi, Jacob. It's, there's a duality to it. So, where they differ. Free will. Free will. Just like free will. This is specifically something talked about in The Law of One, the book that I was talking about. They will often touch on the subject of free will. And this is where I first learned of like, I knew that there was like a dark side and a light side to things, but I didn't know how to pinpoint it. And they explained it perfectly. But Ra, he explained it perfectly. It's like, it's free will. I feel like, I don't know. So, for the light workers, free will is something, it's free. I feel like for people on the light path, it's common to believe that everyone has their own free will and everyone should be able to make their own choice. Duh, common sense. You would think so, right? But on the other side of that, on the dark path of things, when people who choose consciously or unconsciously, the dark path, they will end up using their free will and their choice to take advantage of another's free will for their own needs, for their own will, if that makes sense, for their own desires. So it's the difference between letting people have their own free will and letting them have their own autonomy and individuality, and not crossing that boundary, and then infringing on another person's free will. Specific, like whether you know you're doing it or not, if that makes sense. And crossing that boundary. It's the difference between those two things. I will say, I'm pretty sure there's like a neutrality point here. There's definitely like a category besides light and dark that's just neutral. But I don't really know as much how to define that, so I'm not going to touch on that in this video. Everything I just talked about was something I learned from reading a book about Ra, reading the channelings of the alien and God Ra, from the book called The Law of One. I don't remember who it's by. Some of you might have read it. I definitely don't agree with everything in that book. Sometimes it seems a little nutty, but it definitely helped me a lot with understanding some spiritual things. Okay. So, just because the majority of people on the dark path are grounded in selfishness, like the majority is just part of the hive mind, just part of the capitalistic pyramid scheme, Illuminati, whatever the fuck. Like yeah, most of them are grounded in just selfishness, hurting other people, hurt themselves. I'm glad you found it too, Jacob. That doesn't mean that if you choose the dark path, you are a bad person. And let me explain why. I think sometimes I've seen creatives choose the dark path, like creative people. I think sometimes I've seen people like that choose the dark path, but they have a very strong message. A very strong message that was important to them, that they were trying to get out, or that they got out. However it was, art, music, whatever. And I feel like I really want, at least in this regard, to take a neutral view of things, because I do believe that everyone has free will and everyone has a choice of how to express themselves. But on that note, I will also say that I do not whatsoever condone taking advantage of another being's free will in any way, shape, or form. I don't condone that at all. So if it's something being down out of maliciousness, selfishness, or being stuck in karmic cycles and trauma, then I firmly believe that it needs to be changed. It needs to be grown out of. It's something that needs to be grown from. It's like growing up. That needs to, you can't stay like that forever, if that makes sense. I feel like you can learn from those same things, those same lessons of maliciousness, selfishness, karmic cycles, and trauma without hurting and projecting onto other people, without specifically, intentionally hurting and projecting onto other people. That being said, there are some ways in which choosing the dark path with clear intention and spiritual knowledge going into it can not only be beneficial to the self, but to the world around you. It can be a very, very deep learning lesson, because when you go into the shadow self, that's when you do the most healing. People say it all the time, like you do. People think it's just the light side that's healing, but you have to go in your shadow self. But like, yeah, like literally. I feel like also not only can we have light workers, but we also need, I feel like it's better if we have people on the dark path who actually understand the boundaries of the potential that power of, there's major potential in the powers that come with the dark path. That's why I was trying to say, like, it can be very beneficial to the self and very beneficial to the world around you if you know what you're doing going into it. Not only that, but after a while of learning and gaining knowledge and helping people on the dark path, however you're doing it or whatever, however you're expressing yourself, you can freely choose to shift your intention back towards the good path and use your knowledge that you gained in that area, on that path, on that journey, if you want to. That doesn't mean those things you did on that dark path never happened. Just because you choose to change your path doesn't mean you weren't who you were in the past, obviously. But I'm just saying, like, I feel like that would be really clever to do. Like, if you went on the dark path, learned all the stuff from the dark path people, and then went back to the light path, and were like, "Hey guys, I learned all this stuff." But yeah, you can choose to change path anytime. You don't have to stick to one your whole life. If your perception on it changes, you have the free will to choose a different path. I feel like Led Zeppelin made a song about this. They were like, you can choose whatever path you want, but it's all the same. And that's definitely not how it went. I feel like it's a popular song. It might be Stairway to Heaven, like literally, but I feel like the important thing, you want to be conscious of your path. This whole time I'm talking about the different paths, but obviously there's only so much you can do when you're unconscious of what path you're on, because you don't, it's harder to realize like why people do the things they do and why they have the intentions they have when you're not like consciously aware of this like free will thing, spiritual worth thing. That's why I'm talking about it right now, because I'm like, not only do I need to talk about this so I can remember to think about this in my daily life, but I feel like this would be helpful for anyone else watching too if they vibrate on that level. I feel like often people will choose a side unknowingly, unconsciously. For example, let's say you have an abusive parent who has chosen to infringe upon their child's free will by crossing their boundaries. This abusive parent has unknowingly chosen the path of the dark path, but they are like one of those just majority of those just selfish, fucked up people who don't even realize that they're fucking up everyone else's lives as well as their own. At the same time, that child may be very sensitive and choose to never infringe on another person's free will because they so often feel that pain. They may be young and don't understand that them choosing this path of goodness, they are already in the war. Or people on the path of darkness may try to hurt them or infringe upon their will, and they don't understand why. That's why I was just talking about when you're unconscious of it, you don't understand why these things are happening to you, and it can be so confusing. And I'll get into the confusion in a minute, but it can be so confusing you can get caught up in it. And woof, that is no fun. That's why being aware is one of the first steps to like healing. It can really help you to like realize what's going on and be like, oh, okay. Yeah, Jacob, I feel like it's easy to go through a dark phase, but also when you go through something dark like that, you need like a dark phase afterwards to like just understand what it is that even was. So why? So people will be like, I don't understand why this is happening. I don't understand why this is happening, because they're unconscious of it. And I feel like the reason why is people in the darkness, people who've chosen the path of darkness, are often attracted to people in the light. I feel like that makes sense, like magnets. It's like opposites attract. It makes sense, doesn't it? And this is the nature of spiritual war, but also duality in general. I don't know if you know about Taoism, the book of Tao. So helpful in understanding duality. So helpful. But yeah, people in darkness are attracted to people in light because there's no light without dark. Like it makes sense. And then I think once you do realize this, you realize that about how you can't have light without dark. There's going to be people on the dark path. There's going to be people on the light path. It's quite easy to advance in your own path, in your own power. This is where the fourth dimension comes into play. This is where the 4D comes into play, okay? People are using that knowledge that everything is rooted in duality. Again, read the book of Tao. Taoism in general, it's a religion that I really agree with, even though I'm not specifically religious. But people are using that knowledge that everything is rooted in duality to advance their own will, whether it's light or dark. And in the 4D, it's common for those workers who are aware of what they're doing, what path they're on. You too, Jacob, you too. When people are aware like that of their will and they are rooted in that duality, they use that knowledge to push forward their will, whether light or dark. It's common for them to have that awareness and want to find other people just like them. And they will come together as a little group. This is for people who are more advanced. Like what I was talking about earlier, that's the lower level, you know what I mean? First getting into Lightworker, lower level demons. This is when you get a little bit more evolved in your spiritual journey. In the case of the dark path, the groups will come together to advance each other, whether light or dark. But in the case of the dark path, it's kind of weird because they're advancing each other. But unlike the light workers, they can't also advance themselves at the same time. Does that make sense? Like when you're a light worker, when you help somebody, you're helping yourself. It's multiplied. The love is multiplied. It's an awesome deal. But when you are on the dark path, when When you are trying to advance, you have to push somebody else down. Or if you want somebody else to advance, you have to step out of place. So it's weird that people on the dark path come together as their little groups to help advance each other, but it turns into a pyramid scheme because somebody has to be at the top. That's the weird thing about the hive mind. There always has to be someone on top. In order for someone to be on top, there always has to be someone at the bottom. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? And with that, because I know, I'm laughing here because it all just sounds so ridiculous when you say it out loud. And that's because I'm sitting here, I'm talking about light, dark, whatever. Those concepts attract each other. They literally can mean the exact same thing sometimes. Don't worry, that's what I'm about to get into. The paradox. The confusion. Oh no, we're spiraling. Crash. Yeah, the paradox. This is about to get really confusing. Okay. The confusion is very hard to talk about, and it's very hard to understand. So it might not make much sense. Just try to keep your mind clear. I'll try to keep my mind clear. Just bear with me. So, I know that I've probably already confused you so far in this video if you're still watching. I know I've probably already confused you so far because I've already gotten confused myself. Like, why was I sitting there laughing just a minute ago? Because it's all just like swirled together, like duality. It's very confusing. When talking about light/dark, or even duality in general, we always summon up the opposite of what we're talking about. Hot and cold. I'm having trouble thinking of specific dualities right now, but you always summon up the opposite of what you're talking about. That's the nature of duality. Gentleness, forcefulness. I don't know. I feel like that's why it can be so hard to distinguish sometimes. Do you not like the ambience? I can turn it off. I just thought it might like calm this video down a bit because I'm very like passionate about what I'm talking about right now. Alright. Cool. But that's why it can be so hard to distinguish sometimes, because when you get caught up in that light, dark, they mean the same thing. It's just like, you can get in a loop or a paradox. Balance of light and dark versus no balance of... No. You can get, there's a balance of light and dark versus no, there's no balance of light and dark. And it's like it's a whole loop. It's a whole loop in your head. You'll try to think about it and then you just spiral. The crazy thing about that is the best way to combat the confusion is to clear your mind towards simplicity. And I know that sounds contradictory because you're literally asking yourself to balance again when you're literally just getting caught up in balance, like duality, light and dark. Like, you're literally just telling yourself to balance again and getting back into the confusion. But the best thing to do in that situation is to clear your mind. Allow yourself to be silent, passive, observant. This is why meditation is so good. It's so good. Meditation is so good for healing. It's very important for healing. It's very necessary just to bring you back towards simplicity. Now that we've talked about and explained the confusion, the confusion, let me get into how the confusion can sometimes be used as an advantage for the spiritual warfare. Just got a little crazy. You might find people on the dark path who are very good at mind games and manipulation, mind manipulation. They will take the confusion that I just explained and they will use it as a psychic attack. And this is very effective. You just saying it out loud, it's like, oh yeah, but it's very effective in the moment. It is often a tactic used to recruit someone into the hive mind or to use someone for whatever purposes by confusing them into thinking they're doing what they want with their own free will, that they are doing good by their own free will or whatever they are trying to do with their own free will, by convincing someone that they are still using their own free will even though it's being infringed upon. Hey. I know you know what I'm talking about, Jacob, because that shit goes on. It really does. And then this can especially happen to people who have a harder time falling back on simplicity. People who overthink, have a lot of anxiety, doubt themselves, things like that. Those people are especially vulnerable to getting caught up and trapped in somebody else's deliberate confusion and somebody else's deliberate mind games and mind manipulation. And that's one of the things that can be so tough about going on a spiritual journey is like you will have to face those things. Spiritual warfare, you will have to face those things. And when you are unconscious of it, when you're younger and you don't know any better, you can get a lot of bad stuff happen to you, and those are things that need to be healed from later on. So it's very hard because you are vulnerable to that from a very young age. Spiritual warfare always going on. That's why it's so important to protect the children, and I'll get into that later. But light workers can also use the confusion. Okay, it's not some hopeless scheme. Like, light workers can also use the confusion. A lot of people in the dark path use the confusion, whether they know it or not. And so there's a lot of confusion going on in the world in general right now. But light workers can also use the confusion as a very strong tool to defend from people on the dark path trying to confuse you. Okay? This is more often the more wise and experienced light workers that do this. Oh my god. Shout out Miss Erykah Badu. Erykah Badu is someone that came to mind when I was writing that down. I was like, I know Erykah Badu be doing that shit. She makes fantastic music if you want to look her up. If you don't know her already. But doing this, when lightworkers, yes, Jacob, yes. When lightworkers use the confusion to defend from the dark confusion, it's almost an art form. I feel like, because it's not easy to do. You have to be an experienced lightworker. It's not easy to do. And not only that, but it's not easy to do because you have to have a very clear mind. You have to be able to withstand your own confusion. You have to be able to stand your own confusion through balance. That's what's funny about it, because you can catch them when you're defending. When lightworkers defend with the confusion, you can catch the person on the dark path, especially if they're lower level. You can catch them getting caught in their own confusion, like starting to believe their own illusions, if that makes sense. You'll catch them doing it. And it's almost funny. But yeah, it's hard because you have to have such a clear mind, and you have to be able to withstand your own confusion that you're making through balance. It takes some major experience, wiseness. Like, you have to have been aware for a while to know how to do that. What do you mean by that, Jacob? But when you are able to do that, when you've evolved to the point where you're able to do that and use the confusion to your advantage while keeping a clear mind and while being able to withstand. Yeah. And that's what is so confusing, because truth and lies, that's another duality, and you can get caught up in it. Yes, love, and whatever, because people have different opposites for love, if that makes sense. But truth and lies, love and fear, those are dualities too, and you get caught up in the confusion with those two as well, because it's another light and dark thing. This can be also seen as light and dark. You're right though, Jacob. It's sometimes there are moments when all it takes is somebody telling the truth, the simple truth. Boom. The whole room goes quiet. Sometimes the truth has so much weight. Yeah, I can imagine that. I can imagine you doing that. But yeah, when you are able to do that and you able to withstand your own confusion with a clear mind, through balance, it pretty much breaks straight through the darker path person's attempt at confusion. It really, and that's when it gets into a battle of minds, or a battle of wills. Who has the stronger will at this point? But it also is in who has stronger foundations in their mind, who has a stronger foundation for their mind to keep it from falling like a tower. And what's interesting about these battles of confusion is that people can get very, very deep into them, I feel like. Especially in, let's say, a romantic karmic situation, or maybe someone suing you, a legal situation. Confusion is very easy to get caught up in. It is very easy to get caught up in, even when you are super advanced and evolved spiritual warrior. Having awareness and falling back to simplicity is helpful, but you can still very easily get caught up in it and take a step back and be like, whoa, I was tripping. But it is a very useful tool, very, very useful tool to defend yourself. Okay, well, I'm glad you enjoyed and it resonated a little bit, Jacob. Especially when someone is trying to confuse you, it's a very useful tool to defend yourself, is like, use their own weapons against them. I see you trying to confuse me. Little did you know that I already knew. Also, I feel like deliberate confusion, like using the confusion as a tool, is common with devil worshippers, groomers, energy vampires, things like that. Ugh, bad vibes. That is why it's so important to know to protect yourself from that. That's why I'm making this video today. It is very important to know to protect yourself from that, and to be consciously aware of the path you're on. And whatever path you're on, you are going to meet people on the opposite path. You are going to attract people on the opposite path. So you have to be aware of the spiritual warfare, and whatever you're doing on your path, you have to know what you're doing. Okay. Because if you don't realize what's happening, if you don't realize somebody's using the confusion against you or trying to manipulate your free will, you could get caught up in it. You could end up having your free will infringed upon without even you realizing it had been done to you, or that you had allowed that to happen. That's why you gotta stay woke, 10 toes down. But like, seriously, actually though, like, stay aware of your surroundings. Stay aware of who you're choosing to be with, the places you're choosing to go. Final thing. It doesn't even feel like it's been that long, because I've been like super passionate this whole time talking about this. Like, oh yeah. But this is the last thing I'll touch upon. Had to go so soon. But spiritual war is also something that happens within. First and foremost, it is something that happens within. But I wanted to define spiritual war before I touched on this last point. Do not forget that spiritual war is something that's happening within. It's not just outside, it's inside. You know, we all have our own battle of self and war in our spirit at some point, even if not now, at some point in our lives, especially when we're growing and evolving. We must defeat the old to bring in the new, you know? So it's important to remember that your perception is up to you. You make your own reality of it, okay? You make your own reality of the spiritual war, the light, the dark past, everything I was just talking about, whatever. That is really your ultimate power, is you can change your perception of it at any time. You can advance your perception of things at any time. You can advance your own spiritual knowledge and growth at any time, you know? You can choose to change your path at any point in your life. The difference between the confusion within and the confusion without is that the confusion within is whether or not there's a war in the first place. Because part of you will feel like completely at one and harmonious, even with the war, the internal battle of self going on. You'll still feel complete and at one with yourself, just like that, perfectly. Well, at the same time, another part of you might feel that deep crack of duality within yourself, and that, you know, inner battle of self really deeply. You'll feel that deeply. So that's where the confusion can come from, is like, is there a war going on? Or is there not even a war going on within myself, outside of myself, spiritual warfare? Is there a separation? Is there not a separation? You get back into the confusion again. Once again, this is something that can be easily calmed by practicing simplicity. To be able to face any spiritual warfare outside of yourself, you must first be able to face the spiritual warfare inside of yourself. Does that make sense? So I hope these messages resonated for you. I hope I was glad to share with that. So have a good day. Feel free to comment your ideas. Okay.